pizza? Right on. Okay, we are over the 11,000 mark. Congratulations. That was awesome. Very, very excited about that. We are still driven to hit that 12,500, so please keep it going. You've got 2 films left, and before that, an amazing panel. I'm going to talk about that in a second. But it's working. You guys are putting it out there online. People are donating $10 here, a perk there. It all adds up. So tell folks, like, whatever you can give, $5. It does not matter. It all supports our nonprofit Art House Cinema and keeps us going. So thank you in advance for everything you've done. Keep it going. We do have a prize to give. And I got to tell you, John Carlos and Scott, man, you guys are just like, it's duking it out up there. It was just like, just keep switching places. But when all is said and done, the rules were, between when part 2 started and when part 3 ended, our wonderful friend Martin here has a gift bag for, drum roll, John Carlos McMaster, pulling it off last minute. This gentleman right here. Major congrats. Martin, thank you so much. Let's give it up for Martin for being so rad. And Play It by Fear for bringing us a couple prizes. Again, the other prize will be at the end of the night. Person who fundraises the most will receive all 5 of the movie posters for the 5 films you saw today, and something else which we have planned. So, I'm very excited to introduce tonight's panelists. First of all, I want to acknowledge our City Councilwoman Jessie Lopez for supporting Chucky Fest in the first place, and one of the panelists I will introduce for being the brainchild behind this. So let me introduce Jessie first. Born and raised in Santa Ana City Councilwoman Jessie Lopez, Ward 3 is a, yes, give it up for Jessie. Who, by the way, just won her re-election, everybody. It's not all doom and gloom. There are good things that happened last week, so congratulations. A firm believer in civic engagement and the right to equal treatment and opportunity, and is passionate about empowering community participation. A lifelong Santanera who attended Hoover Elementary. Any other Hoover alumni? That's right. Willard Intermediate? Okay, and Santa Ana High School? Yeah. Right on. Jessie continued her post-secondary educational career by pursuing an AA at Santa Ana College. Yeah. Awesome, and a BA in Sociology at Cal State University, Long Beach. Okay. While working 2 jobs to support herself through school, Jessie helped organize students to lead campaigns addressing sexual assault on campus and supported efforts in making higher education more accessible for individuals such as herself. She continues her advocacy alongside community groups in her hometown to fight for equity, accountability, and transparency. And frankly, missing on this is your support of the arts, which is very important to me, needless to say, not just for the Frida Cinema, but just for the arts and culture in your community at large. Arts and culture is a language, it's a culture, that's why it's arts and culture, and it's important, and it is in peril. So I thank you for everything you do for supporting arts and culture, and for keeping windows open to the world for people who need them. So everyone welcome Jessie, Councilwoman Jessie Lopez. Have a seat, get comfy. And I'll introduce our next panelist is, I'm particularly proud of this young lady, Justina Bonilla. Justina Bonilla is a film journalist with a focus on Latinos in contemporary media, the history of Latinos in Hollywood, as well as their contributions to horror and cult cinema. She began her journey as a volunteer writer for the Frida Cinema's writing group, and has since contributed to notable publications like Hollywood Reporter, Horror Buzz, and Daily Dead. Justina has also appeared in award-winning Shudder documentaries, including Eli Roth's History of Horror, 101 Scariest Horror Movie Moments of All Time, and Horror's Greatest. If you've seen that, you'd recognize her. She's always dressed in black, looking really fierce and beautiful. And 101 Scariest Horror Moments of All Time, and Horror's Greatest. Her favorite Chucky movie is The Bride of Chucky. Ladies and gentlemen, Justina Bonilla. Next up is Veronica Palacios. Veronica Palacios, give it up, is a trans musician and writer based near the heart of Santa Ana with a BA in film production from Cal State Fullerton. Anyone? Okay. Like half of our staff graduated from Cal State Fullerton. It's interesting. And is passionate about developing her screenplays into films. Her love of horror and fascination with the darker aspects of human nature inspire her work across both music and writing. An advocate for the trans community, Veronica also creates online videos to entertain and encourage others to live boldly. Bold is one of my favorite words, so I love that. Boldly, that's what we do. She is currently preparing to release new music under the name Vero Muerte. Ladies and gentlemen, Veronica Palacios.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. A former Frida intern, so welcome back.
Yeah, I look a little different next time.
Okay, so here's what's funny. When someone else brought that up, I'm like, okay, she was looking so familiar, and then I took a second look, like, of course! It's good to see you again. Last but not least, the individual who, when I met with this wonderful group and said, hey, so we've done these 2 horror marathons, and I'm thinking, the person who like flew out of her seat and said, Chucky, it's gotta be Chucky, it's gotta be Child's Play, and we love her for it. Sandra E de Anda is an award-winning writer based in Santa Ana, California. She holds a BA in English from Reed College in Portland, Oregon. Any Reed College? You never know. Her work has been featured in the LA Times, Voice of OC, and Citric Acid, Sin Caesar, The Ear, and the late OC Weekly, where she, RIP, where she co-founded the weekly column Deport This. Sandra has also led introductory writing courses for young writers in Santa Ana, emphasizing social justice and community engagement, supported by funding from the California Creative Corps. Additionally, she conducted original research at the Swedish Film Institute in Stockholm, Sweden, okay, which culminated in her thesis, The Construction of the Self Through a Gendered Discourse in Ingmar Bergman's Films. I'm gonna read that again. Trevor, pay attention. The Construction of the Self Through a Gendered Discourse in Ingmar Bergman's Films. Inspires me to do an Ingmar Bergman retrospective, bringing you back here.
Oh, I have a whole thesis on the Hegelian nature of persona.
Oh, we'll have to talk persona after. We're talking persona. So ladies and gentlemen, give it up for our wonderful panelists. And sit back and enjoy Possession and Power, Chucky Through Latino Fandom, Queer Identity, and Capitalist Critique. Thank you.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for being here and supporting the Frida Cinema's programming. As you all know, every dollar that you help raise directly goes back into making this space so much better for everyone. So I want to thank you for being here because it's a Saturday and you could be doing anything else. So give yourselves a round of applause. So the concept for Chucky Fest, why we're all here today, was born, as Logan said, not too long ago down the street. We were all at Chapter 1, celebrating a big win, the city investing in more arts programming for everybody through Art Walk. And we were talking about the different genres of movie that we all loved, and we talked about horror. And there's a personal anecdote that I like to share with people about why I love Chucky Films, Children of the Corn, Freddy, all of these films that I grew up watching in the 90s. And it was basically because my parents were too broke to do anything else with me and my siblings. And so VHS movies, for those of you that will remember, were super affordable. Blockbuster, the different corner stores, you could get a movie for $1, you could get 3 for $5. And really, we would sit in front of the TV screen for hours and watch these movies that really, showed us a completely different life. And through watching those movies, I learned how to say a lot of bad words. But, the cool part of that was that my parents had no idea, why I was from one day to the other running around saying fuck and bitch at the house. And they were wondering, where are you learning this, right? And little did they know that it was this is what you're teaching me by having me watch these movies. And so we started to think about, why do a lot of Latinos love Chucky so much? And all of the different intersections that the entire franchise touches upon in terms of the Renaissance with Latino audiences, the horror genre, and the queer identity, and capitalism and consumerism. And so those are some of the themes that we hope we're gonna discuss here tonight. And we also wanna have some time at the end for Q&A for any of you to ask our amazing, intelligent powerhouses that are here today, talking about why Chucky is so popular with the Latino culture. And so we're gonna start off asking Sandra first, tell us a little bit about why Chucky Fest, And understanding that Chucky has been a staple in Latino fandom for decades, what do you think it is about this character and his history that resonates so strongly with Latino audiences? And also, how does Chucky's character intersect with experiences or values that are significant in Latino culture?
Okay, so I'll start off, right? A lot of us grew up Catholic, so like the title of the presentation is called Possession and Power. But we're just obsessed with possession because we were scared. We were taught to be scared of God and to be scared of the other. And so I think that's just kind of an initial response. But also, I think there is probably like a more technical response to that, right? Because as Jessie mentioned, there was a large VHS distribution happening, right, in the 90s and in the 80s and the 90s. But then also Santa Ana had that rich history with having like local Cambodian and Latino families own many of these VHS stores, like right in the working class neighborhood. So we had access to that, but also Telemundo, Telefutura, Univision, they were paying cheaper funds for something that is maybe considered like a B film, but it was being widely distributed to its Latino audiences, right, in the 90s especially. And so it just made it very accessible. And I think, I think Jairo had mentioned the same happened, right, with Dragon Ball Z and just, like Japanese anime, they were just cheaper things to purchase for the viewership in this country. And so I think just the accessibility and the affordability of those films brought them to our homes. But then of course, because at the end of the day, Chucky, Andy, and Andy's mom, they're a sort of family, so it has that family component, right? And also, the mom is working class, and she's a single mother, and Andy is left without much attention. So I think like it also mimics, right, our experiences as like 90s kids, especially I would say even our generation loves Chucky because we sort of grew up, not necessarily like Andy, but like, like our parents were also working the way that Andy's mom was always working. But yeah, those are just a couple of things.
Yeah, Veronica, Justina, anything you want to add?
Yeah, to go off of that, I watched Chucky at a young age where I shouldn't have watched it. Like I was probably like 6 years old or something. And my dad, for sure, he would sell movies at swap meets. He would purchase movies at swap meets. So I think that's why he also was able to kind of get a lot of these really like iconic like horror films from that decade. But also, I think something about Chucky, him being like a wisecracking little like guy that like cusses, something that really appeals to the Latino community in a lot of ways. And yeah, like I think because also he subverts like the American like dream in a way as well, right? Because it's not a complete nuclear family, but it's a family, a very American family, and Chucky kind of like just messes everything up for that kid and his mom. So I think that's one of the interesting things that probably has appealed to a lot of Latinos as well. What else? Yeah.
Okay, I want to make sure this was on. So I could rant about this for like an hour. But I guess just to break down the question, so if we're going to look at what resonates with the Latino community, let's be honest, most of us know somebody named Chucky. That's not the doll. We all know somebody, I know too. But then also Chucky is hiding in plain sight because he's this psycho killer, but he's hiding in a doll's body, and the police, nobody takes Andy seriously. And I think for a lot of us who are I have immigrant grandparents, immigrant parents, it's, be the good Latino. You're hiding in plain sight, basically, to survive. And also, I think with people who are also undocumented or people who have family members that are undocumented, they also have to hide in plain sight. So I think there is that kind of connection, keep your head low, appreciate what you have, don't rock the boat or else, this family member could be deported or everybody could be deported. My grandmother was an American citizen born and raised in Arizona. In 1929, when the Great Depression happened, she was deported with her family. They were a mixed status family. So there's always that fear. So I think you have that. But also, Chucky to me, resembles like the American threat on what would be like the traditional Latino family unit, I guess you could say, because obviously Sandra could do a better job talking about consumerism and what Chucky represents in that regard. But Don Mancini himself, the creator, said that this was basically a spoof on what he saw growing up. His dad was in marketing to children. So we see how, if you look at a lot of commercials from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, how they're directed towards children, like, oh, eat this, sugary cereal, here's the G.I. Joe. And you could theoretically make that theory that Chucky resembles Americana, the American way of life, and kind of, in a way, almost shoving it down Andy's throat, like, and then that, balance between assimilation, how much do you assimilate in order to be American, but then how much of your culture do you keep in order to stay within your Latin identity? So I feel like that element could be brought in. And then very quickly, we talk about Chucky's, character intersecting with experiences. I'm sure a lot of us have seen our older Latina family members with creepy dolls. I had an aunt that was a hoarder of dolls. She grew up poor without any dolls. She literally had her whole house was filled with dolls. She had a room filled with boxes of incomplete doll parts. Some of them were broken. That is some of the scariest shit I've ever seen in my life. And she kept buying more dolls, kept shoving it in that room, and they're all like different parts. Oh my God. But I think you see that element. And then also, I think with a lot of us, you can tell I wrote a bunch of notes on those, especially this particular, is I think in regards to Latinas, because I've noticed that a lot of Latinas and queer Latino members, they really relate to this character. And I think there's this expectation of what we're supposed to be in the culture, whether, within the binds of machismoism. And like with Tiffany, it's kind of like, for lack of a better description, fuck it, I don't want to be that. I don't want to be limited based on what you're putting on my gender or what perceived behavior should be on my gender. So I think a lot of Latinas, and I've noticed a lot of queer people love Jennifer Tilly because she's kind of that, or the Tiffany character, because it's like, she wants to be this because society's telling her to be that, but at the same time she's like, nah. I'm also, like the scene with Bride of Chucky that will come up is her baking cookies. She's trying to do the Martha Stewart thing, and then at the end she goes, fuck Martha Stewart. So I feel like you also have that element as well.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely like an underdog, something so small but yet so powerful that instills so much fright in people, right? And I think to your point, Chucky is invisible because he's not even supposed to exist to begin with. And so the threat is nobody, as you said earlier, even when Andy is trying to say something to his mom, they're not taking Andy seriously, which is a whole other topic of conversation that we could indulge about how when smaller kids or teenagers are trying to bring up issues, they're kind of just sidelined because they're not taking seriously. But moving on to question 2, the horror genre often uses monsters to explore repressed identities and desires. How do you see the Chucky franchise as a vehicle for expressing queer identity, and how does he defy or conform to these traditional horror tropes? Do you want to start today? Yeah.
I think I should. I think I kind of dove into that a little bit earlier, but I think a lot of us, like I'm saying, that you have to be this or that, that you can't. And then you see a lot of fear that people have with queer identity, a lot of fear that people have with women saying, you know what, I don't want to be married with 3 kids before 25. I want to do this, I want to do that. And when you're pushing these norms that have been put on people for, decades, for centuries, for millennium, it freaks people out. We're seeing that now, not to get political, but horror is very political. You see that more and more in how people are reacting with like phrases like your body, my choice. and whatnot. So for me, I feel like somebody like Chucky is symbolizing, like you said, or what I said earlier about hiding in plain sight, but also it's, I don't have to be your little cutesy wootsy doll that goes, hi, wanna play? I can be who I wanna be. I'm not saying we all wanna be psycho killers, but but the idea of just breaking that norm, and again, people not wanting to believe it. I mean, I've seen people who have talked about coming out of the closet or saying, you know what, I don't want to have kids, I want to do this instead, and how their family or their general community, how they react to it, how they will freak out over it.
Yeah, for me, I feel like it has in a lot of ways almost like affected my transness as a child, because when I was little, like as a little kid, like 6, 7, I would dream about wanting to be a girl. I would pray to God and say, you know, I wish I could wake up a girl. So when I watched Child's Play, I think one thing in my mind as a kid, I thought, whoa, like I wish I could go into a different body. Like I wish I could go into the body of a woman, you know, kind of thing. And also, I think it provided a way for me to kind of have a sort of like escapism from my own like life, from the fear of the trauma or not being able to be myself kind of thing. So I think Chucky was kind of, in a lot of ways, those movies were a comfort to me. And also, for example, like Bride of Chucky was a movie where it was the first time I saw a gay character, and I thought, whoa, like what? And even at that time when I watched that movie and I saw like such a like queer representation, and also like all these like characters that were like going against the grain of society, it showed me like, whoa, like wait, this is wrong, but at the same time, like it inspired me in a lot of ways to, I guess, want to be more of myself, you know. So I think these movies really. Maybe, you know, kids should not be watching them, but but in a lot of ways, for me, you know, I'm thankful I was able to watch those movies growing up, because I was able to explore myself more and realize, like, hey, society doesn't have to be this one way, identities don't have to be this one way kind of thing,
So with like, when queer and horror come together, or just any sort of queer representation, historically queer individuals have always had some sort of, like queer characters have had some sort of tragedy attached to them, right? So like Boys Don't Cry, you know, there's, I think, you know, traditionally that's what we have seen on screen, that you know, non-binary queer folks are always going to suffer some form of tragedy. And I think that Chucky actually subverts that, because though, you know, it's not in your face like it's queer, you know, it is queer. And and of course there's no queer character suffering. And actually the writer of Chucky is a gay man, and I was just watching a couple of interviews about him, but he basically said that Chucky was this creative pursuit that came in trying to deal with his feelings with how his mom in real life was also a single mother, but she was obviously dating some like seedy guys, and like so he was watching his mom like grow up. As he was growing up, he was watching his mom date like, you know, very intense men, and I think, you know, Chucky is able to describe that relationship that he had with these men. But also like to go into the sort of, you know, the layers of the queerness of the film is like, as we mentioned, right, the untraditional family, the chosen family, right? And of course, you know, Chucky, Andy, they're not a chosen family, but, you know, in the series, the Chucky series, that they do talk a little bit about that chosen family aspect. But that's like some, you know, something that I think is really big in the queer community out of survival, just like the chosen family trope. And the other thing I wanted to say was,
I mean, we can't really move beyond this question without bringing up Glenda, right? A trans character in the Chucky franchise. And I don't know if anyone wants to speak about what that means specifically.
I mean, yeah, I would love to. When I first saw that, I don't even know how old I was, but it was pretty like unbelievable to me, and I think maybe they didn't handle it in the best way in the film, but I still like really appreciated the fact that Don Mancini was able to add this character, and you know, it's very nuanced, of course, and there's a lot that that character kind of expresses and goes through in the film, and I think also I love the fact that, you know, Chucky and Tiffany like accept Glenn and Glenda the way they are. Like, that's so cool to see on film, especially in a horror film. And during that time, when that film did come out, there wasn't really much of other trans people in other films. So I think it really helped pave the way. Even if it's not the best representation, I still believe that, you know, that was kind of a good way to kind of like get the ball rolling in for other films as well.
Anything else? I just want to bring this up about Glenn Glenda. What I thought was really interesting is, you know, obviously, as you mentioned, Tiffany and Chucky loved their child, but at the same time, what's interesting is when they went, oh, we have a baby. Okay, well, you're Glenn. No, you're Glenda. And you see immediately the parents kind of projecting their gender ideas onto their child. Like, oh, no, you're not a boy, you're a girl. Oh, no, you're not a girl, you're a boy. And how you see, what I thought was interesting, how they're challenging gender stereotypes because of the fact that Glenn is very, you know, sweet, mild-mannered, you know, pacifist, he's not violent. And Glenda's like bloodthirsty. So it's interesting kind of seeing that aspect as well. But what I did, like, piggybacking on what you said, to see kind of this acceptance of their child, I mean, I can't even begin to think what audiences were thinking back then, because it's the early 2000s, and considering how, you know, back then, the phrase like, oh my God, you're so gay, you know, with that level of homophobia being around, for him to basically say, screw you guys, I'm doing this, I mean, that was a lot.
Absolutely, yeah, the 2000s were the most problematic, I think, decade of film ever. And so I think, like, yeah, that was a huge kind of like, fuck you, you know, to, I don't know, this cinema, you know.
Yeah, so my last thought, it just came back to me. But ultimately, Chucky challenges like heteronormative structures and society, especially as we saw with Bride of Chucky, like just the questioning of one's designated role. And I think that queer folks are always challenging that standard.
Yeah, and very quickly, here's an Easter egg in Bride of Chucky. Look at this really closely. When Tiffany is lying in the bathtub, she's watching Bride of Frankenstein. Now, what's interesting, that's a very, you know, you had James Whale, who was a very openly gay man at that period, which was extremely taboo back then, but, you know, he didn't give a crap. And what's interesting is that with Bride of Frankenstein, it was two men that created life. So it's interesting to see that little Easter egg in the movie.
Yes, amazing. And I think that Chucky's embrace of outsider identities, especially through characters like Glenn and Glenda, it really aligned with the genre's history of championing the marginalized. And you might say, wait a minute, Chucky's going around killing everyone. How is he, you know,
the people's champion? But through the earliest, you know, films in the franchise, you really get almost like a sneak peek of the underbelly of what's going on in Chicago, right? And also understanding that Andy lives in a single parent household. His mom is lower middle class. She's trying to make things work. And so because of all of these issues, it leaves Andy with little supervision in general. And I think part of this connection that we're bringing up is tied to capitalism and consumerism, because Chucky was such a mistake, but because these dolls were bringing in a lot of dollars, the issues that people were trying to flag about Chucky were completely being ignored at the expense, literally, of people's lives. And so it really highlights not only one, that Andy's mom was having to produce labor to be able to afford living in Chicago and be able to afford to keep a roof over Andy's head. But also, I think in this specific critique is that Chucky became the predator almost like in every American's household because of overmass consumption. And so, speaking about overmass consumption, Chucky's original story is tied to consumerism, a mass a mass-produced toy turned deadly. What do you think his story says about capitalism, consumer culture, or the commodification of fear?
I can start. So I just drew this parallel today, but when the Chucky films were originally made, they were made in the 80s, and that was also when you started to see more rhetoric around the war on drugs. And so, Chucky's representative, right, of this fear-mongering that people didn't even necessarily like consider because it's adult, but the same was happening, right, in Chicago and just the United States, but also, in the depictions of the city, it's seen as grimy, as dangerous, as Jessie mentioned, like the underbelly. There's a lot of depictions of houseless individuals, people doing substances. So, I think it was very interesting that this movie came around in the 80s, and I think almost representative of like that sort of war on drugs, that fear-mongering, that, fear is always at home. And then, of course, in terms of like alienation of labor, it just became so alienating because Andy's mom had to go to work, and so she's alienated from her son, so she's unable to be there for him. And I know that is like a universal experience with like first-gen immigrants and immigrants in general. So I saw that sort of parallel as well. And then, yes, as Jessie mentioned, just the sort of mass consumption, the mass delivery of this sort of toy, and the sort of I don't know, the sort of nature of it that we kind of see now today, right? Hyro was mentioning Temu, but like how people are just buying stuff super cheap, and then they all have these they have lead, they have other things, right? So you're not just buying, you're buying like an image, but at the end of the day, you also get additional things that are not maybe the best. And I think that that's what ultimately like capitalists don't care about what we consume as long as we pay for it.
So I think when we talk about consumerism, I just wanted to bring attention to this. In the original Child's Play, you see the peddler is trying to oversell Chucky, and how you see Karen, that she's willing to do that for her son. She's willing to put in the extra hours. She's willing to strain herself economically to try to give her son some joy. And I have to say, the peddler's Latino, so I love that there's a Latino hidden in there, like, hey, I'm bringing hell, have fun. So I love that. I mean, I just noticed it rewatching films, like, oh my God, we're in it, yay! But, when we see this mass consumerism, it's basically, for me, looking at something like Chucky, you see how, despite how deadly he is, it was just one kid who's crazy. The doll's fine. And we see this over and over again. Obviously not a crazed doll, but we see it with the pharmaceutical companies, with opioid issues. We see it with, even with food products. I mean, you look at over-processed foods. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love potato chips as much as the next gal, but we see how there's ingredients in our food that's banned in Canada. It's banned in Europe. But we see this obsession with money that, hey, we're gonna make something and we're gonna sell this garbage to you, and you know it's garbage, but you're gonna keep consuming it anyway. I mean, we saw through the pandemic exploitation of workers. So what if you could be exposed to this illness, we don't know what the repercussions are, as long as we keep making our money. Or what we see with social media with, hey, we can spread as much information as we want and not really get into that much trouble, and that financially benefits, what was it, right after, again, try not to get too political here, but right after the election, how you had people who own these companies make even more money, the social media companies, after the election. So we see this system where people are benefiting off of misery, benefiting off of pain and suffering. So what I like about Chucky is like, yeah, I'm deadly, so what? He's, at least it's blunt about it. Anything to add?
Not sure if this was mentioned, but I think also the Chucky as a brand is so bright and colorful, and it's complete contrast to Chucky and what he does. You know, he's a murderous doll, and I think yeah, like the company kind of like pushing Chucky to kids, especially, you know, advertising to children, to attract them to this thing, to buy more, to make more money for that. I think that's also a big thing as well.
Thank you. So the Chucky franchise seems to embody multiple outsider identities. How do these different facets of the franchise come together to make the franchise both terrifying and relatable? And I think we've talked about some of those themes here, right? But anything else you would like to add?
It's easier to make an enemy of somebody else rather than dealing with your own reality. John Carpenter said this in an interview, that it's so easy to blame somebody else. It's somebody else's fault. But in reality, the hardest is to look within the demons within ourselves, the problems that we have, and go, how are we contributing to this issue? Because it's so easy to go, yeah, it's Elon Musk's fault because whatever's happening on Twitter. It's like, yeah, but at the same time, I'm not calling it X, by the way, but but at the same time, it's like, but we are using it. He bought it because we use it. So I think with outsiders, again, it's so much easier to blame somebody else. Oh yeah, it's Chucky's fault. It's Frankenstein's fault. Not, wait a minute, what are we doing to continue this? Because like you had mentioned, with Chucky being so bright and adorable, hi, I'm your friend to the end, all that cutesiness, people are still buying it. People are still consuming it. So again, while it's true that you do have the enemy from outside, I feel like the most dangerous ones can be from within.
Agreed. I mean, I think there's no more perfect point in time than to look outside of this theater to really see who is being demonized, right? There's a particular group of people that are your neighbors that do everything in life in the same regard that you do and are being completely put in danger. And I think that's why I think so many people are fans but also critics of the horror, because it really, to an extent, mirrors the very, very ugliness of the real world.
And that's what some people don't want to admit.
Yeah.
People like, I know people who look at Night of the Living Dead, they go, well, that movie's not political. It's not political. Yeah, it is. It is. Whether overtly or not, it does comment on these things. And obviously, as time's gone on, there's more and more attached to it. The more time that people are allowed to see it, more people become, educated within history or whatnot, they see it and they go, oh, yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
Great. Anything you want to add, Sandra?
I just wanted to, what's been fascinating about the Chucky franchise, and I think how all of these qualities come together, is just the evolution of it, because the first three films are much more corporate and dusty and like dark and industrial. And then you get into the 90s, and it gets more campy, right? Because the 90s had its own like style of being, right? That's kind of like, who gives a shit? Like, we're gonna be whoever the fuck we want. We're X generation, like we're doomed. And they really went and made something fun, versus those three first films. So I think it's just, I think also the beauty of Chucky is just throughout time it changes, like any good piece of art. And I think for us, it's just, for the Latino community, it's just remains a staple. We even have a taco truck named like Taco, like Chucky. Like, I still see people like having Chucky decals on their cars. Like, you'll see Chucky randomly at the swap meet, right? At La Mirada, or like any swap meet around here. But there's always gonna be a Chucky shirt or Chucky, thing in the Latino community, or at restaurants. You just see it randomly and you're like, man, Chucky's still part of our like superstructure, like our community.
Well, also, going off of that, like Chucky has evolved into a hero in the films as well, right? The focus is on Chucky. It's almost like, oh, well, fuck Andy, like I want Chucky to win, But yeah, like, and also as the films progress, the people who are getting killed are usually people who are, bad or, vile or who do have those positions of power. Like in Chucky, how the real villain is actually like the cops, right, and all like that. So I think I think that's really something really cool about the franchise as well.
And I just want to put this out there. So I found this article and by Reuters, which is a German news outlet, and apparently Mexican police officers did this. They arrested Chucky. And I'm serious, they did this last year. There are pictures of Mexican police arresting Chucky for causing mayhem. And they're literally in the police station, and then Chucky's being handcuffed, he's being patted down, and the police are saying, oh look, we found a knife on him, and we found firecrackers, and I just thought that was so funny. And they said, and we released him because,
he's a good guy.
It says here, and I'm reading this word for word, I'm quoting the article, Carlos, that's what they called him, was later released. Local outlets responded, though the Chucky doll's whereabouts are still unknown. This is a real article from last September, Carlos N. But it shows you how it's not just here, but abroad.
Yeah. Agreed. And we wish we could have an hour to discuss all of the themes throughout the entire franchise, but we do have to wrap it up and let you continue finishing your marathon and helping the Frida Cinema raise money. But before we close out, we want to thank Logan, we want to thank everybody, all of the volunteers at the Frida Cinema. We also want to thank Councilmember Ben Vasquez for helping sponsor the events. And to all of you, again, for being here and helping to raise money for this incredible franchise.
Do you want to do questions?
Yes, and we're going to do Q&A.
Yes. Cool. I can go to the microphone. I'll be happy to bring the mic out to anyone. Oh, we got someone waving in the back. I'll bring it back to you.
Oh, no. Let's do this.
Be nice.
No, Haida wants me to hate. I'm not going to hate. So
Hater.
these films are rated R, yet all of you saw it as children. So many children have seen this. What do you think are the benefits of children being into this franchise and seeing them?
I mean, yeah, I think children sometimes they need that escapism, right, to kind of maybe have comfort. Like me, for example, I think it's a big important thing. But also, I think when they're exposed to media that scares them, I think it kind of I don't know, it's like a form of creative expression that is needed sometimes. I think sometimes it's good to tap into like that anger or that fear. They're not negative emotions. They can be, good emotions to feel and to go through. And I think also, I think it's like tapping into that fear is important. It's not a bad thing. And I think that's the thing that I think is really cool for children to be exposed to.
I think we also have to look at it this way, Gustavo, when we talk about horror. Most horror was NR, if we look at the not rated, for many years. So you had kids going to drive-in seeing Dracula and Frankenstein double billings, and a lot of kids would connect with the villains because they felt like they weren't being listened to, they weren't being understood. So I feel like Chucky, again, no one's taking the doll seriously. So for me, I'm an aunt of a 2-year-old nephew, so we're definitely going to see this movie in the future. Not right now, because he's 2. And then he's a flaming redhead on top of it, so it's like, oh my god, I wish I could dress you as Chucky for Halloween. I probably will for my birthday, but But for me, I wouldn't have a problem, obviously with my brothers and sister-in-law's blessing, watching these movies with him when he feels ready, when he's curious enough, and him asking the questions like, why, but also at the same time knowing that, hey, this was a kid that wasn't believed at Andy. But at the same time, I would want to give my nephew that space and say, hey, if something does scare you, you can come to me, and I will take it seriously, and it's something we can talk about. So I feel like it can be a tool to say, well, this has happened in the past, it will be different, moving forward with you.
I think the benefit, for myself, was just being able to view the franchise with a whole community and it being this collective experience. And I just remember I grew up on that kind of standard, and we had like a lot of our family like migrating. So like Ministry is like full of a lot of immigrant refugee families, but you know, they'd be migrating, but we'd still, you know, they'd be staying with us for a couple of weeks and move on to the next place. But you know, we were always watching Chucky. I remember the Blair Witch Project was another one that I felt was a big collective experience that we all had, because we had never seen that sort of real footage type of filmmaking. But I think it just, that was a positive, I would say, just being able to watch it with like so many parts of my family.
Yeah, and I think for better or for worse, it's a memory, right, for so many of us, part of our childhood, of spending time with our siblings, or spending time with my dad, even if the quality time was picking out a movie. And so I think it's something that really stays with us for a long time, even though we don't want young kids going around cussing everywhere. I think it's kind of how it was brought up here. You can have conversations with children, with young people, and they are going to be capable enough of understanding. You don't say that word, or if something is wrong, you come to a trusted adult and speak about whatever is hurting you or making you feel uncomfortable. And so even though there are very strong themes in the franchise, I think there's also this big part of how it bonded a lot of people, and even now how as adults we can have conversations that we can relate to and say, oh my God, I also did that, right? Or that was also my experience growing up.
We're living proof that, you know, we watched as kids and we came out to be pretty good, right?
Well, that inspired the same thought. Like, raise your hand if you watched horror movies way, way, way too young. Okay, and here we are supporting the arts in our community. So there may be something to that, right? Very cool. Any other questions? Yes. So
Hello. So my name is Warren. I'm actually trans and Latino, so this panel was a bit of a surprise to me. But I just wanted to ask, so basically I see this like element of like spirituality too in Child's Play franchise, and I think that was interesting that you brought up Catholicism. My grandmother was into Santanera, so like that stuff with Dr. Death, like it was really relatable. And the fact that, you know, Chucky isn't just this, you know, this monster. He was born like Don Mancini basically said, like, he was born evil. This is a problem he has. And so I think that, like, when he evolves, when he becomes more personable, I think that's because, like, I think he's relatable because he's an actual person, and he, like, gives voice to the darkness within us. Like, for instance, he treats his killing like an addiction, et cetera, et cetera. But my question is basically, what do you attribute the longevity of Chucky to? Because it makes very little sense for a for a film like this or a franchise like this to still be extremely popular today. So I just wanted to ask, you know, what elements make it so so eternal, basically? That's my question.
We still have outsider culture per se. So I think that with Chucky, what gives him a continuous life for other horror movies, if you go back to the films from the 30s, from Universal, these are still beloved films almost 100 years later. You have even silent films like Nesferatu, which is being remade for this year for Christmas, which you're probably guessed correctly what I'm doing for Christmas. But I think it's because we still struggle with many of the issues back in the 80s that we are now. There's still homophobia, there's still sexism, there's still racism, and these are things that have been around for, you know, generations. And as they continue to progress, they evolve in different ways. They get better in some, but then worse in others. And I feel like the appeal of Chucky is there's always that outsider. somebody always feels like an outsider in one way or another. I mean, I was brought up with brothers, and it was okay for them to like horror, but I liked horror. Ay, Dios mío, what's wrong with her? But the idea of, you know, us being afraid of change and evolution, I think a lot of people just want to kind of stay in their seat. They just kind of want everything to stay as it is. But with Chucky, he's kind of slashing into, for lack of a better description, into a new world, into new things like, hey, I'm not this freak that you thought I was. I mean, like you had mentioned, him being born evil, being born a voodoo. It's, I was born as I am. And that's something that I want. And you see it even with the Chucky series, and more that acceptance of, yeah, this is who I am. So I think what will always appeal about Chucky is that we'll always feel an outsider in some way. Some part of us always will. And I think there's a comfort in seeing somebody that says, yeah, I'm a freak, I'm weird, or I'm whatever you say, and whatever you want to label me as, but I know who I am, and that's okay. We're not all killer dolls, but I'm sure we can, you know, take pride knowing like, hey, there's others like us. We're not alone, because sometimes when we're, you know, marginalized in some way, we can feel alone. But obviously, proof here, we're not.
Yeah, I think also filmgoers, a lot of the time, a lot of filmgoers, they don't want to see like some kind of like Lifetime, you know, movie. They want something that is going to be rebellious and break boundaries and really, I don't know, really go against what people are comfortable with, right? So I think that discomfort is something that we look for as well.
I feel like just the nature of criticism will always give works like Chucky relevance, because, you know, it will just mean something very different every time. And so, you know how I mentioned, right, you know, it started in the 1980s at the beginning of the war on drugs, and then now we're actually seeing it, you know, boomerang again, right, with the passage of Prop 36, obviously like with Trump, but like, you know, it's like the genre of horror is able to sort of get us away from another horror. And I think that Chucky's just going to continue to accrue meaning throughout the years. You know, just because, like, for example, like feminist theory was really big in the 70s. In the 80s, you get, you know, Marxist theory. In the 90s, you get like neoliberal, like deconstruction theory. And so, like, it's just always going to remain a permanent staple because it could be critiqued. And I think that's what makes it so wonderful, because, you know, it's the fact that you can critique and always find something, like another thing, like you mentioned, Easter eggs. Like, there's always gonna be so much more depth because the creator also had so much depth. So I think, you know, that's what I would consider.
I think we have time for one more quick question. If anyone has a, yes, I'm on my way.
I just saw there's an actual Chucky doll here.
Hi, Chucky.
Hi, Chucky.
Hello. Please don't kill me.
My name is Johnny, and my question is, you know, like, we're watching this film and we're talking about how horror is sometimes a mirror that mirrors back to us, like, some of the issues that we face. But specifically as women, and talking about it boomeranging and things coming around again, what are your thoughts on the way that Andy's mom was institutionalized and she was separated from her child for taking his side and telling the truth? And that's something that I think as marginalized women, if you're Native or Latino or whatever, you know, we grew up in that, where our parents were always afraid of us being taken away, not because they were doing anything wrong, but simply because we were poor or we were Native or we were Latino. And we see this, like, for the first time in Chucky happening to white people. So what are your thoughts on that, or what do you think that, or that perspective kind of gives women something to think about in the way that what we go through as marginalized women?
I think what we need to look at is, with Karen's character, she is rebelling against the system in her own way, that even she is the working poor. So we have seen historically in American history, when women were out of line, they were institutionalized. Husband wants to get rid of his wife, institutionalize her. There's a horror movie called Bedlam from the 1940s. It's with Boris Karloff. It's a beautifully done film. It was produced by Val Lewton, one of the, I would say, the horror icons of the 40s. And in the movie, they had a woman who basically they wanted to get rid of. They didn't want to deal with her anymore. She was too much of a threat to the establishment. So they gave a faulty reason to institutionalize her in Bedlam, and they did, and they were successful in doing that. So it's not, unfortunately, that uncommon historically speaking. So when we look at Karen, what was interesting is she finally believed Andy, right? And said, hey, my kid's not lying. And even the police officer, forgot his name, the police officer got attacked by Chucky. But as he didn't say, I believe you. He kind of looked at her like, yeah, I believe you. I believe this crazy crap. Mm-hmm. But if you notice, he didn't really go to her defense and kind of kept his mouth shut. And then she wound up institutionalized. So we see the lack of support in certain areas. But I find, Karen a badass character that even though she didn't believe her son at first, the mother instinct, I guess you call it, did kick in, and she goes, you know what, I'm not gonna take this lying down, I'm gonna protect my kid, I'm gonna do what I can. And I don't know why, it kind of reminds me of that scene from Dumbo, where Dumbo's mom gets institutionalized for protecting her son. So, not to get too depressing here, but
That's just such a great question.
Yeah, it's almost like Chucky is like the patriarchal system that is always in our face, always, every day. And it reminds me, I met a mother a couple years ago who got arrested because she was paying like a phone bill. She had left the kids in the car for just 2 minutes. And then by then the PD had arrested her, and then that ended up creating like removal proceedings for her. But it's like, single mothers have it hard, and even being coupled up and like having a child, like it's always going to be tough to bring life, but also like to take care of it. I mean, and even in bringing life, right? Like a lot of women experience extreme depression after giving birth, and then ultimately the state is always lurking, and you're always going to be accountable to the state, but the state is ultimately also patriarchal. So that's kind of what got me. I liked your question because now I have a patriarchal, like a feminist lens to look at Chucky through.
But also Chucky, you could make that argument obviously that he represents it, but at the same time, he's breaking it down. Mm-hmm. Because he, again, he's a criminal and he's running away from his issues. Like, okay, I'm gonna do this and just kind of start over. So he's somebody that's not really, I feel like, looking to sustain a patriarchal system. Like for me, where I'm coming from is like, to hell with all of this. It's just, I'm gonna disrupt everything because I'm just thinking about myself. You can go throughout the whole franchise. He dies, he comes back, it's the same thing. He dies, he comes back, it's the same thing. But I feel like he's kind of that, for lack of a better description, middle finger to this the structure. So he could represent it in certain ways, obviously, like in Seed of Chucky, trying to put masculine identity and behaviors onto his child, but at the same time, he's like, I don't have to do what society says. I want to be who I am, regardless.
I think giving a middle. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to add that like the franchise in itself, has created a lot of strong female leads, and I think also I love the fact that it allows women who watch it to feel empowered when they do see these characters, go through these very horrific things, but they usually come up on top, right? But in that case of the mother, no. But characters like Tiffany, going against the patriarchy completely throughout the film and saying, no, like I'm not going to be your little housewife, kind of thing.
Well, I was gonna say, giving a middle finger to the structure, great place to end. So folks, give a round of applause again for our amazing panel. Those of you who asked questions, thank you. Amazing questions. I have to say, we've done a lot of panels here, but that was awesome. That was illuminating. That was incredible. And it hopefully just gave a whole new lens to these movies, which is great. I also have a little present for all of you. We had these made.
Oh my God.
And we may have one more for one highest raising person, highest fundraiser tonight. So thank you one more time, everyone. Round of applause for our amazing panelists. We're going to take a 5-minute break. We're going to start the next one. I just want to give you all 5 minutes if you need it. So 8:35, we'll be back for the 4th entry of our 5-film marathon. Thanks so much again. Thank you.